Love the sound of kids.
An alle Teilnehmer und Zuschauer. Dadurch können alle hier wirklich die Nachrichten lesen und dadurch haben wir auch eine Transparenz für alle anderen Teilnehmer.
Hey folks, welcome.
Haben, dass ihr in dem Webinar, anders als im Online-Training, erstmal alle gemutet seid. Daher habt ihr aber die Möglichkeit, hier eine Hand zu heben. Wenn wir sehen, dass jemand die Hand gehoben hat, dann haben wir die Möglichkeit, die Person zu entstummen. Das heißt, dann habt ihr die Möglichkeit, Fragen zu stellen. Das heißt, gerne die Hand heben, wenn ihr das Bedürfnis habt.
Hey, Paddy. Hey, Grant.
Hi.
Wenn ihr jetzt noch mal eine Frage habt, die ihr vielleicht nicht mit allen teilen wollt, die ihr nicht im Chat stellen wollt, habt ihr außerdem die Möglichkeit, unter dem ganz rechten Button
in the right meeting.
You are, yes. I'm trying to work out how I mute everyone.
Wenn ihr da draufklickt, habt ihr die Möglichkeit, eine Frage einzufügen.
You're doing this one in German, Paddy.
I don't know any German, I'm afraid, Dave. Hey everyone, how are we doing? How's everyone?
Very.
Simon, Rendell.
Hey, Paddy. Hey, everyone.
I saw you post it earlier. I'm gonna have a look at that in a second. Wow, we've been totally oversubscribed today, so you guys made it well on time. We had like 170 people sign up, plus about 30 in the waiting list. We only had 100 spots, so you're in. That's it. All right. So, Grant, shall we go to the map? Let's see. And
yeah, let's do it.
Feel free to add, you'll post it to the map. Let me just put the instructions in the chat.
So what was our question, Paddy?
Our question was, who is your most inspirational leader? There we go. Someone that's inspired you. It could be someone at work or someone really famous. So, well, let's start from the US then. Right? We have Kevin.
Well, my idea was to use the pan. We first cook the pan.
Yeah. Hey, y'all.
We have a big fan of Erica Hall. Awesome. Very left-hand side. Oh, we know this guy. Todd Cherches.
Heard of him.
Hey Todd, who's your most inspirational leader?
That's a tricky question. Let's see who I would pick. Barack Obama is the first person who comes to mind when you ask me that question.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Burner in CT. What does CT stand for?
Connecticut.
Connecticut. Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, wow. Can't pronounce that name, but founder of the Turkish Republic. Wow. Ooh. My friend Ryan. Awesome. Yaron.
A little quiet there. I don't know if... yeah, you did say Barack, didn't you?
Obama. Yes.
Wow, 70 people joined us so far.
70 people. Cool.
Hello from Buenos Aires, Agostina.
Ah. Maria.
Francesco, oh, good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm very, very well.
Francesco's in his honeymoon period at the moment because he just started a new job he was telling me about the other day. So.
Oh, yes. First week.
Oh, so good to see you, Francesco. Right, let's see if we go to Europe. A few in the UK. Oh, wow, look at these. Francesco, who are these guys? Jimmy Cricket. No, Jimmy.
I know Jiminy Cricket is.
Jiminy Cricket, is it? Ah.
Pinocchio.
And Wendy, the darling of Peter Pan.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Love it. Gemma from Cheshire.
List.
Obama, yes. Oh, some awesome people there. Don't know them all, but yeah. And Dill, hey Dill.
Oh, I saw you doing some cat stuff online, Gemma.
Sorry, Grant, say that again.
Well, Gemma's said about her kata coach. I noticed that she's doing some. She's doing a conference, Gemma, on that. Or...
Yes, I'm speaking at Catacon in America and also Catacon Europe. Yeah, the European version.
Excellent, good stuff.
I read some of your articles on LinkedIn, Gemma. It sounds awesome. I need to get into.
Thank you. It is very awesome. Genuinely changed my world. 20 years of working in the field, and it's changed my world. Cool.
Wow.
I'm interested to find out more as well. I might catch you offline.
Cool.
Awesome. Indy from Birmingham. Hey, Indy. Gandalf. Can't go wrong with Gandalf, can you? Gandhi. Barack seems to be popular. Gabby Patrick was my old boss in Texas, and she totally changed my life. So yeah, it's all her fault how I turned out. Yeah, she's good. Simon had David Marquet. By the way, everyone, it's David Marquet, not Marquette. We pronounce it totally wrong in the UK, and David told me off for that. So just for reference, Elon Musk. Awesome. How many people do we have on now, Grant?
We've got 72.
Superb.
How are we doing? 8 minutes in.
Yeah, you might want to post the Zoom link.
I'm going to do that. I'll pop that up. I'll post in there now.
Awesome. So there's a whole load of people that wanted to come, but they couldn't get a spot. So we're just going to post the Zoom link out for them. Because I think if you were going to come, you'd be in by now. So let other people. Steve Jobs, Jerome. Maria says, I'd buy people lots of things to learn. Yes, sure. Michelle Obama. All right. Carolyn, inspired by Sabine Hoffman. I was looking at Sabine Hoffman earlier. She's the CEO. Is that right? Got the wrong one. Felix says by many different people. Who else do we have?
Who else have we got?
Stefan from Copenhagen. Can't pronounce his name. Bergeron. CrossFit coach. I'm going to Google some of these people afterwards.
I'm the same. I drew a complete blank. I haven't even put a post-it on there, but I reckon Darth Vader's going to be one of the best leaders.
Oh yeah.
Purpose, he knows what he's after. The kind side when he needs it.
Absolutely. Andre,
hey, hi.
Hey, dude. Simon Sinek. Yes, he's awesome. We like Simon. Ayman from Egypt. Superb. Right, we're at the kind of 10 minutes past 6 mark, so we will kick off. Let's have a quick look at this one. APJ. Good one. And last but not least, certainly in Australia, not in Australia, but I think Japan. William Reed, inspired by Scottish samurai Thomas Blake. Very fancy. Superb. Thank you so much, folks. I will just pause the music for a second, and I will stop sharing my screen. Awesome. So once again, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Grant and I have been looking forward to this meetup for, I think, well over a month now, probably 2 months. And just a little bit about myself. So I'm an agile practitioner by trade, but I also love visual thinking, and I'm based in Birmingham. So that's a little bit about me. Just to say very quickly before I let Grant do a quick intro and before he introduces our guest, we are recording the session today, and we will provide the link via the newsletter or on the YouTube channel that we have. Todd's very kindly agreed to stay back a little bit longer than the 7:30 mark because he has a huge amount of material to get through. So if you do want to stay back, feel free. But if you do need to jump off at 7:30, then absolutely understand that as well. So without further ado, Grant, I'm going to hand over to you, my friend.
Thanks, Paddy. Yes, so yeah, my name's Grant. For those of you who've not joined us before, we've been running the Visual Jam since last August. Over 700 members now, Paddy.
Oh yes, 700 exactly.
700 members, unbelievable. And yeah, in terms of our next guest, I think I've been following what Todd does for a while. Todd will know, and some of you who've seen me speak on visual thinking will know I kind of regularly pinch Todd's material and quote his definitions of visual thinking and some of the benefits it brings. A massive inspiration. If you haven't picked up his book, it's an absolute goldmine of content for kind of engaging meetings, storytelling, all sorts of things in there. But I will let Todd introduce himself and he can explain it a lot better than I can. But thanks, Todd, and welcome.
Thank you, Grant. This is great, and welcome from New York City. And you know, all three of us are wearing our superhero shirts today. I got Spider-Man, Superman, and we got Spider-Man and Batman. So as we're talking about leadership, one of the ways I frame leadership is, what are your leadership superpowers, right? Is it visual thinking, visual communication? Is it holding conversation? Is it listening? What is your? So that's one question we just want to pose for you. If you had to be a visual superhero, what would it be? What are the powers you bring to the world? So I'm going to share my screen right now, and let's get that up on the big screen. And for those of you, most of you know that you can just slide the along the line if you want to see both the screen and more of the people in the room. So one thing you'll notice, I talk loud and I talk fast because I'm from New York, but I'm an extreme introvert. I am a 3Bs kind of guy. I'm a back of the room, behind the scenes bookworm. So the fact that I'm talking to 100, all these people, all of you today around the world, and I've done TED Talks, I do all kinds of public speaking, pushing myself out of my comfort zone on a daily basis. So hopefully you'll do that today too. One of the things I want to talk about, a lot of people in the visual thinking community are great artists. I've seen some of the work you produce and your graphic recordings and everything else. I suffer from ICD syndrome, and I don't know if you know what that is. It's I can't draw. So I'm a visual thinker who cannot draw that well. So I always want to get people to basically wrap that I can't draw attitude and throw it out the window, because we can all draw, right? If you could draw a straight line, if you could draw a square, a circle, or a triangle, you could draw something. So I'll tell you some stories as we go along. But if you can play Pictionary with your friends and family, or charades, and use body language, then you're a visual communicator. So we'll just leave it at that. And we have Daniel Stillman on the call today. He wrote a book called So the Good Talk, right? So he's one of the masters of visual communication that I know. So I'm glad you're here with us today, Daniel. So the power of visual leadership. What is visual leadership? The name of my book, and it's actually now a registered trademark. I applied for US patents. The first 2 times I was rejected. The 3rd time I got it approved. So visual leadership is now a registered service mark for my company. And why do I spell it with a single shared L? Because from my perspective, who you are and how you lead is inseparable from the lens through which you see the world, right? Your background, your culture, your upbringing, your experiences, your education, all those things create your paradigm, and your paradigm basically influences your actions and your behaviors, right? So we need to think about who we are and how we lead. So if you think about visual leadership, as a Venn diagram, which is a mental model, and we'll talk about mental models shortly. Visual leadership is a word that unites visual thinking and leadership. So it's where visual thinking and leadership meet. So in all my training, my coaching, my teaching, I'll talk more about that in just a second, it's all about this. How do you get your vision out there into the world? Because if you think about it, what does it mean to be a visual leader? If you say you're a visual leader, what are we talking about here? What does that mean? If you say that someone is a visionary leader, like an Elon Musk or a Richard or a Branson or a Steve Jobs, what does it mean to be a visual leader? Martin Luther King, next Monday is Martin Luther King Day here in New York. His I Have a Dream speech, if you've never watched it or if you haven't watched it recently, on his day, on Monday, watch it with the video, with the words. That's one of the great visual speeches of all time, and he does not use PowerPoint slides. He does not have a business. He didn't say, I have a business plan. I have an Excel spreadsheet. He said, I have a dream. And what is a dream? It's a vision. It's a picture in your mind's eye of an idealized future state that's different from and better than the current reality, right? So if you say, I have a dream, I have a vision. Visual thinking, we want to frame it today in this way. If you woke up in the morning and say, oh, I had this really wacky dream last night, that's a vision in your head. If you visualize what you're going to wear, how your day's going to unfold, that's visual thinking. If you envision 6 months, a year, 5 years down the road, that's visual thinking. So it's not just drawing, it's so much more. We want to look at visual thinking in a variety of different ways today and think about, as we go along, what is your leadership vision? What is your vision for yourself, for your organization, for your clients in the future, for your children, for your family, right? So first thing I want to ask, we're going to make this as interactive and as engaging as we can while still having 78 people from around the world. If someone said to you, what is visual thinking? Someone who had never heard the term before, how would you define it or describe it? So I'd like you to jump into the chat box and write your best definition, how you would explain, what does visual thinking mean to you? Let's see what people have to say. I'm not going to read them out loud, so just keep your eyes open, watch them as they fly by. See a lot of key phrases: picturing in your mind's eye, illustrating ideas, expressing things visually, ideas on paper, using pictures, structuring your thoughts visually. Great. Expressing stories, words with pictures, pictorial thinking, a universal language. What else? I've seen the phrase mind's eye a few times, and I've used it. Does anyone know? Type in the chat box if you know who coined that phrase or popularized that phrase. To see something in your mind's eye. Does anyone know? I'm looking at the chat box. Let's see if anyone could. Grant Wright, that is correct. No, it was not Grant Wright. It was someone else from England, but way before Grant Wright. Shakespeare, always guess Shakespeare. For any question you ask, guess Shakespeare, Confucius, or Aristotle. You have like an 80% chance of getting it right. So Shakespeare in Hamlet, when he saw the ghost of his father, and think about seeing a ghost, an apparition. He did not know if it was a figment of his imagination or if it was a real apparition. So he said, I think I see my father in my mind's eye, Horatio. So what does that mean to see something in your mind's eye, right? So we're going to talk about that in just a second. So visual thinking, in a nutshell, which is a metaphor, which we'll talk about shortly, is about thinking in pictures. That's like the most basic, simple explanation we can give it. So think about this. You have an idea in your head. You need to frame that idea in such a, which is a metaphor again. How do you frame that idea so that you can communicate it in some way, either through words and or pictures, to someone else, so that you can get that idea out of your head and into their head so that they can say, yes, I see what you're saying. If you think about it, that's going to be our catchphrase today is, I see what you're saying. How do you get other people to see what you're saying? How do you see what other people are saying? I'm glad people found that funny. That's great. So I'd like to see what you're saying. Well, I'd like to know what you're drinking is what I'd like to ask. I see what you're saying, right? So the power of visual leadership is our theme for today. And let me just hit the pause button for a second, which is a metaphor. I'm going to call out all the metaphors so we can realize how often we use them. So today, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Todd Cherches, based in New York City. My company is called BigBlueGumball. Our motto is we make training entertaining. And I do management training, leadership development, team building, public speaking, and executive coaching. And as I said, we make training entertaining. My background is in the entertainment industry. I used to work for Disney and CBS developing TV shows out in LA before I moved back to New York. And my mission is to educate, engage, and excite. This is about what, and think about this for any of your communications. Educate is what do you want people to learn and to know. Engage is how are you going to capture and hold their attention. And excite.
Recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options.
And excite is about how we can inspire and motivate people to do something different. So think about educate, engage, and excite. It's my company's catchphrase, but think about how you can incorporate these 3 E's into everything you do. So think about this for any communication. What do I want people to know and learn? How am I going to capture and hold their attention, either through words and or pictures? And how am I going to inspire them and motivate them? What's my call to action? What do I want them to think, feel, know, and ultimately do as a result of my interaction with them? So BigBlueGumball, the company, is a metaphor. The name of the company, BigBlueGumball, represents the world, the earth, the globe. To us, the world is like a big blue gumball, however you want to take it. And our mission is to help make the world a better place, one leader at a time. And our philosophy is that everyone is a leader in one way or another. Even if you're just leading your own life, you are a leader. And if you're leading other people, that's even a larger challenge. If you're leading ideas, leading movements, that's what it's all about. So everyone here is a leader. And today we want to think about how we could be a better visual leader. That's what today is all about. In addition to my company, BigBlueGumball, I'm an adjunct professor of leadership at NYU, where I teach visual leadership in the Human Capital Management Master's Degree program. And at Columbia, I teach leadership in the MFA theater program. I teach leadership for Broadway stage managers. So in that, I get to use a lot of Shakespeare show tunes and theatrics to help convey our ideas. So I am also a TEDx speaker. I did my first TEDx talk in 2019 on the power of visual thinking. I was supposed to do my second one last year on the magic of mental models, but it was canceled because of the pandemic and pushed to the fall of this year, assuming we're all back in the real world by then. My book, Visual Leadership, was just mentioned, just came out in May, 10 years in the making. It took me a year of locking myself in this office and actually getting it written and published by Simon & Schuster. Take a look at the cover for a second. Originally, I had a blue eyeball because my company is called BigBlueGumball, and I wanted to have brand consistency. But what was wrong with the blue eyeball was that it was not inclusive. So I went with this rainbow eye. And what does the rainbow eye represent? Think about this rainbow eye on the cover of the book. The rainbow represents diversity and inclusion and reminds us that no one in the world views the world through the same lens that you do, right? So as a leader, that's so important. People are not mind readers. You see something, you picture something, you have a vision in your head. You have two jobs as a leader. One is to formulate that vision. The other is to communicate that vision in a clear, compelling, and inspiring way. And we have to realize that people are not seeing the world through the same lens that we are. So from a diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity perspective, we have to shape that vision and frame that vision in a way that other people get it and get on board with it. To do that, we need to be innovative and creative, which is the second aspect of the rainbow eye. All the colors of the rainbow represent we need to be creative and innovative in terms of how we get our ideas out there into the world. My other concept I want to talk about, which I came up with after I wrote the book, which is why people say, why is flipping the eye not in your book? It's because I came up with it afterwards. The idea behind flipping the eye is we need to take that eye and flip it around. In fact, I just figured out how to do this, so let me do that one more time, a little special effect there. So we need to turn the eye around on ourselves and look internally at our belief systems, our biases, our assumptions, our paradigms. Why do we think what we do? Why do we believe what we do? Why do we communicate the way we do? So we need to be introspective, reflective, and connective. That's what I say. We need to look backward, look inward, and look forward to the outside world to connect with other people. And the other component of flipping the eye is we have to realize that other people see the world through a different lens. And our job as leaders is not just to get our vision out there into the world, but to help other people turn their visions into reality. And we could do that through visual thinking and visual communication, which is the focus of today. So with that, let's get started. I have to do that one more time. I figured out how to do this too, so a little less, but I'm the least technology savvy person in the world. So for me to do this, this is like really high tech for me. So one more time, let's turn the page and let's get started right now. So I see what you're saying is the foundation of what we're doing today. In what ways do you use visuals to get others to see what you're saying? Let's see, I know we have graphic recorders here. We have people in learning and development. In the chat box, just, one thing I wanted to say, I know this is going fast. We're gonna send you a PDF of the slides so you can go back to it. We want you to engage with the content and experience it. And I know we're going through a lot of stuff. I'm packing probably 12 hours of content into our 90-minute session, but it's going to be fun, and you're going to get a chance to draw in just a second beyond any visual notes that you're taking right now. So in the chat box, type for us, how do you use visuals right now in your work, in your life, to get others to see what you're saying? Let's see what you come up with. Go. Facilitation and teaching, sketches, metaphors, storytelling, diagramming, putting things in boxes, creating structure, learning processes. Great. Facilitation, brainstorming and graphic recording, process model. This is great. So what's interesting is everyone's coming at it from different angles. There's some overlap, visual communication, putting reports together, One of the things we want to think about is who's our audience and what's our purpose, right? Who are we communicating to? What is their orientation? Are they oriented towards visuals or not? We're all visual thinkers in different ways, but for some people it comes more naturally and intuitively than for other people. So I think we'll find that as we go along. So let's pose the big question. Why visuals? We're all visual thinkers, otherwise we wouldn't be here today, right? So why visuals? What is it about visuals that help us to be more effective thinkers, innovators, communicators, trainers, coaches, managers, and leaders? I sum it up in the following way, A, C, and R. And I talk about this in my TEDx talk. Attention, comprehension, and retention. Right now, I am sure, I would guess that most people's eyes are drawn towards this head. You are reading the words in the head. Our brains are wired that way. Like magnets, our eyes are drawn towards visual imagery. That's just the way we're wired. So if you're thinking, oh, where did I leave my keys? You picture the last time you saw them. What is that person's name? You're picturing that person in your mind's eye. It's on the tip of your tongue, which is a metaphor, right? So we use visuals all the time, whether we realize it or not. Attention. When you use visual imagery or visual language, it helps to capture people's attention and gets them to focus. If you say, look at this, you got my attention. Comprehension. When you use visuals, it helps people to understand. And retention, it helps people to remember. Right? And Grant, you added another word onto this. I want to give you a chance to jump in with that because I thought that was a great insight because there's a lot of other words we could add. These are my three primary, but Grant jumped in with that. So if you want to add that to.
Oh yeah, the one that I add when I talk about it, I just pinch yours and I add exploration. So the idea of using visuals to explore a problem or start to get creative, that's the kind of idea I threw in there.
That's great. So exploration, motivation, innovation, right? There's a lot more you could add, but there's something magical, as we know, about the rule of three. So sometimes you have to make choices and decide, what do I go with, 4 or 5 or 10? I actually started a list after Grant mentioned that. I came up with a list of about 50 words I could have added to this list. But for right now, I'm going to stick to attention, comprehension, retention. But anything you want to add to this? One of the things I want to mention is that the magic and the power of visual models and frameworks is you can make them your own. If you have a better one, create it, right? So if you don't like the model, come up with your own model, right? So that's how I develop most of the models in my book and many of the models in this presentation. So let me give you a real life example. This is the syllabus book list, the book list and the syllabus of my NYU graduate course on leadership. This is the same information. Let's put them side by side. Where is your eye drawn? Which one's going to capture your attention? Which one's going to lead to better understanding? Which one are you going to remember? If I shut off the screen right now, if I had just shown you the list, maybe you could have remembered 1 or 2. With the visual, you actually end up remembering 3 or 4 or 5, right? That's the power of visual thinking in action. Someone mentioned dual coding theory in the chat box. I'm going to mention that briefly in just a second. Metaphorically, our left brain and right brain. Left brain is drawn to text and facts and logic. Right brain, I always remember left brain logic, right brain rhythm. That's how I remember. So rhythm, music, art, visuals, that's our right brain, right? So when our left brain and right brain are battling it out, the right brain always wins. That's just the way our brains are wired. And for proof of this, I've watched this animation about 1,000 times and the right brain always wins, which is scientific validation that this model is 100% accurate. So 2 of the theories that come to mind, I just want to touch on these. So you can always look these up, just Google them. And there's plenty of videos as well on YouTube. The picture superiority effect basically says that when picture and text, in fact, I'm going to shut off the dualist because it's distracting, because again, the power of visuals is to draw our attention. Picture superiority effect says that pictures are superior to text alone, right? So if you have visuals and text, that's a powerful combination. But if they're doing battle against each other, people's eyes are always going to be drawn to the visual. That's the way our minds are wired. Dual coding theory, and it's dual as in 2, D-U-A-L, not D-U-E-L, as in the duel that we were just watching. Dual coding theory is just that. When you combine words and pictures, it is more powerful than either words or pictures alone. We need to just figure it out. I had a whole conversation with someone the other day about using emojis. If you, unless it's a heart or a thumbs up or something really simple, if you replace a word with an emoji, it takes the brain a couple of seconds to process what that emoji is and what it means. If you have the emoji in addition to the word, you get it intuitively, you get it immediately. Like if you say, I love you, and there's a heart, boom, one-stop shopping. If you have I heart you, that's obvious because we know what the heart is. But if you have some other image there that's smaller or not as common, it takes people a few more seconds to interpret the meaning behind it. So the recommendation is do what you want and what you need, but the power is dual coding theory is to use both. And so when you're graphic recording, you may have an image that's clear to you, but if you put the word under it, that reinforces what you meant to draw so that people get it right away and quicker than the picture alone, because pictures are subject to interpretation, as we all know. But pictures are worth 1,000 words. There's this expression that exists in every language. Even Napoleon said a good sketch is better than a long speech, although he said it probably in French. I don't know if he spoke any English, but the whole idea is that a picture is worth 1,000 or 1,000,000 words in many cases. That's why vision triumphs over all other senses. So what I'd like to do right now is introduce you to my 4 different ways to think and communicate more visually. I talk about this at length in my book. So my 4 ways are as follows. I'm putting up the visual icons right now. Let's see, just type in the chat box if you can guess what the 4 visual icons represent as I take a sip of water. What would you say? There's no wrong answers. There are right answers because I have my own answers, but there's no wrong answers. So take your best guess at what the 4 icons represent. Great answers. Many of these are right on the money. So let me pull back the curtain, metaphor, and reveal. So my 4 categories of thinking and communicating more visually are using visual imagery and drawing, using mental models and frameworks, using metaphor and analogy, and using storytelling and humor. And I'm going to walk through each one very quickly. In my longer workshops, I go through each one in depth. But in fact, each one could be its own 3-hour workshop. But today, we just want to give you the metaphorical tip of the iceberg. So these are the 4 categories. So let's start with visual imagery and drawing, right? I just mentioned the tip of the iceberg. So right there, that's a very common metaphor, right? What does that represent? Very simply, what we see versus what we don't, right? So the iceberg could be used when you first meet someone, your first impressions are the tip of the iceberg. When you watch the first 10 minutes of a movie, that's just the tip of, or read a book, that's the tip of the iceberg, right? So that's our first impressions versus what lies beneath the surface or behind the scenes. A map, this is a visual subway representation of New York. So if you were to come here to New York to visit me, I can explain how to get to the Upper East Side where I live from Grand Central or Penn Station. But I think you'll get there a lot easier if you have a map. And if you look at the color coding and the numbering system, it's brilliant. And just like the tube in London, every subway system has its own methodology. But the New York subway system, the red line goes up the west side, the yellow line goes, the green line goes up the east, and the yellow line kind of cuts diagonally, then goes back up. So you could say to someone, take the red line to the yellow line and switch there at a certain street, right? So that's a way of communicating visually. And one thing I want to mention is that in my 4 categories, they are not mutually exclusive, they overlap. So you could use a visual image, and that could be a metaphor like the iceberg, or it could be a mental model or framework like the subway map. Using data visualization, that is one of the hottest topics in the world right now. There's a whole program at NYU right now in the HR data analytics field about how do we visually represent data. And we're talking about algorithms. We're talking about everything from plotting diagrams to how do we analyze data. That is using visual imagery. And this is my presenter's visual checklist, which I'll blow up for a second. So when I'm preparing for a presentation, I could have a bullet point list, but instead, this is what I use. So you can see I have my remote control with me today. I have my water. I have my markers. I use this and I lay out on my bed or on my desk all of these things when I'm going on a trip, which I haven't done in a year, as most of us haven't because we're stuck at home. But this is a great visual way to say, do I have everything I need? And it's so much more effective than that bullet point list we could very easily skip over. Why is that? Again, the power of visuals. This is my visual bio. I've been interviewed on about 40 podcasts since my book came out 8 months ago. I send this to the podcast host so that when they interview me, they could ask me about my career. Oh, tell me about when you worked at Disney. First of all, I just gave away my age, so that cat is out of the bag. So I am older than I look. But if someone could say, oh, tell me about when you worked at Disney in 1992. What was that like? Tell me about how you transitioned when you moved back from Hollywood back to New York. Oh, what was your best experience in Hollywood? I had lunch with Tom Hanks one day. I had lunch with Vanna White one day. I have a million. Pee Wee Herman interviewed me to be his assistant. So I have many Hollywood stories, which you could save for another time. But the visual bio makes it so much easier than a text resume to walk you through my career from where I started to where I am now. And in my NYU class, on my final session, I walk my students through my whole career and they get a kick out of it. So let's talk about drawing, because so many of us, that's a focus of today, right? So in my workshops, I ask, as this is a very common question, right? If I do a visual thinking workshop for a group of CEOs, I'll say, how many of you could draw? And no one raises their hand, maybe 1 or 2 people. You ask a group of kindergartners or first graders or 5-year-olds how many can draw, they all raise their hand, right? So have we lost our ability or our confidence over the years? It's probably our confidence, right? So how do we get people to overcome I can't draw syndrome? Now, I can't draw as well as this. I don't know if any of you know Matthias Jacobson. He did this visual graphic recording of a workshop that my brother and I did on Culture Crash. And that's us in the lower left corner. I'm the one with the glasses. But again, the power of graphic recordings is what? It captures information visually so that we can remember it, attention, comprehension, and retention. So this is, I may get up at a flip chart and do a mind map, right? That's a way to use visual imagery or drawing, or a napkin sketch. Now, I just had my first article published in Inc. magazine 2 months ago called, Can You Draw What Your Company Does? So when I send out the slides, you could click on the link or you could just Google the title. I basically walk through an exercise I do where I get people to draw and explain what their company does through visual imagery, even if they can't draw. And it's an interesting exercise. And I'll let you read it to get the full story. But I want to do a drawing exercise with you right now that I do with my students. Are you ready? Get your pens ready. I always have all my my colored Sharpies with me. Here's what I'd like you to do. Take out a pen or pencil and a piece of paper or markers and draw a picture of a leader. What does an effective leader look like? Paddy and Grant asked us earlier, name a leader, but draw in 2 minutes. In fact, I'm going to set my timer for 2 minutes because otherwise I never give people enough time. 2 minutes on the clock, draw an effective leader from your perspective. Go. Okay, 1 minute remaining. Okay, another 30 seconds. All right, time is up. You can, let's hold them up on the screen. Let's see what you came up with. You can always fine tune it later, but let's see your preliminary drafts. What do they look like? Great. Nice work. Some very detailed, some very broad and general. some metaphorical, some more literal. It's always interesting to see how people represent. And Paddy, I think, is going to give you an opportunity to share these later, right? You're going to give people a way to post them. But for right now, let's take a look at this. I do this exercise with my NYU leadership students, and I got this idea from this New York Times article where it says, picture a leader. The series of images emerge. So here are some samples of what people drew of an effective leader. All right, here's an effective leader. Big ears, because they listen. They're thinking outside the box. So there's a box there. They have followers. They have heart. Right, my door's always open. That was one example. Here's one. You watch because you have to manage your time. You have ideas. You have solutions. You have big ears for listening. You need to communicate your vision. Here's one that's a little more detailed. Balancing love and fear and respect. Being decisive. Have a vision. Listens well. Well-dressed. Executive presence. Right. What do all three of these have in common? Let me go back for a second. 1, 2, and 3. Type in the box. What do they have in common? They're all men, Yaron just pointed out. In this article, picture a leader. Is she a woman? Most likely not. It was, I forget the percentages, about 80% of people, including women, drew men. So they were either like stick figures or they were male. So what does that say about our paradigm? What does that say about the way we visualize leadership? And what can we do to break that paradigm, break that bias, break that assumption in the spirit of diversity and inclusion, belonging, equity, right? So most people will draw a man. What are the consequences of male leadership? And it's usually a middle-aged white male, right? So what does that say? What in terms of hiring, in terms of balance, in terms of building teams, right? So look at these three drawings. So when I send out these slides, if you click on this link, it'll take you to the full article. But it's just really interesting, again, how our brain processes something as simple as draw a leader, because it says a lot about how we envision what leadership means and what it looks like. And to make differences and to break that glass ceiling, we need to change our mental model of what leadership is and what it looks like. One of my favorite leaders now is, I'm drawing a blank on her name. Who's the president of New Zealand? Type that in the box, remind me. Jacinda Ardern. She's great. I mean, she's one of my favorite leaders. And there's a lot of articles now about how men and women leaders are managing the pandemic and who's doing better. So I don't want to get into the whole conversation, but it's really interesting to just explore this topic of leadership visually, which is what we're doing today. Let's go to my second category, mental models and frameworks. So here are a few. I showed you my Venn diagram. Who knows what the upper right is called? It's a classic model from psychology I teach in my leadership class when we do motivation. Vicky got it. It is Maslow. Lower left, what is that called? And where is that from? The 2x2 matrix, yes. Daniel Stillman got it. It's the Eisenhower matrix. Stephen Covey gets credit for it because he popularized it in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But Daniel is correct that Dwight Eisenhower, General Eisenhower, who became President Eisenhower, he came up with this amazing model that I teach in my class. And if you think about a company's organizational chart, that is a framework, right? That's a visual representation of reporting structure, right? So also think about other techniques we use that are visual mental models, frameworks, a mind map, a storyboard, an affinity diagram, a process diagram. So you could use drawing, but you could also use other tools. You could use software to create these visuals. So for some people who say, oh, I can't draw with a pen, there's other ways to visually represent things, through represent ideas through imagery and other technologies. This is a sample in my class. This is the Visual Leadership Toolkit at the end of my course. These are some of the visual models, the key visual models that people leave with. You're going to leave today with the passion skill matrix model, which we'll be introducing in just a few minutes. Let's go to the last two, metaphor and analogy. So metaphors and analogies, I mentioned before that visual thinking in a nutshell is that. Why did I say in a nutshell? It wasn't literally in a nutshell. It just means in a small, simple, compact way, this is what visual thinking is. So we don't even realize the images, the metaphors we use many of the times. I talked about framing, putting a picture frame around something. My wife once bought a painting that I didn't love, but then she got it framed and I really liked it. What's the difference? The frame around it changed the whole look and feel of it, right? So think about how you frame your message in such a way that you get people to see what you're saying. So the picture frame is a metaphor, but one that's so overlooked, I bet you didn't even think about it, was the light bulb. The light bulb represents an idea, right? But why is that? Who knows this answer to this trivia question? What was the very first use of a light bulb to visually, metaphorically represent an idea? Anyone know? I did some research on this. Grant, you know, all right. If you want to type it in, go to it. So yes, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, but who used it as a metaphor? Let's give people a chance. Let's give them one more second. It was way before Pixar. Any other guesses? Disney, even before Disney. You're on the right track. All right, Grant, you want to reveal? Grant, Felix the cat. Yeah, so the creator of Felix the cat, again, think about the 1920s. The light bulb was just being popularized at that time, right? So the idea of a light bulb going off, that flash of inspiration, it's so commonplace now, we don't even think about it, right? So think about the metaphors that we use visually and verbally that are so common, they're almost cliches, we don't even think about it, like thinking outside the box. Like, in fact, one of my things I talk about is you can't think outside the box until you have something inside the box, right? So I just do a whole presentation just on thinking inside the box. So why metaphors and analogies? In a nutshell, again, they make the abstract concrete, the intangible tangible, the complex simple, the unfamiliar familiar, and the invisible visible. But the keys with metaphors and analogies, if we use a good one, it helps to benefit us and get our message across. A poorly chosen metaphor can actually confuse and complicate things. So you could say this is the key to success. We all know that what a key is, so that's universal. You could say that feedback is a gift. When you give someone feedback, it's like giving them a present, right? Because they learned something they didn't know before. You could say that it's like talking to a wall with some people. You could say you sound like a broken record. Now this visual metaphor does not always resonate. The visual resonates, but the phrase itself doesn't, to a lot of people who did not grow up listening to a vinyl album where you know that feeling of that screeching feeling and that repetitive sound of a needle getting stuck in the groove. So one of my students thought a broken record was a good thing, like setting an Olympic record, like winning a gold medal in the Olympics. So I said, it's like a broken record. There was no visual imagery there of a vinyl album. So again, we need to put ourselves in the shoes of our listeners, which again is a metaphor, which I just realized. So we use them even accidentally all the time. I use a lot of baseball analogies because I'm a huge baseball fan, both the Yankees and the Mets. But if I'm communicating with someone from the UK or Australia or Japan, Japan actually is a big baseball town. But thinking about who your audience is, I may use a soccer analogy, which I was scolded by my friend Andy Lapata to call it football, not soccer. I may use cricket, I may use rugby, I may use hockey, right? So think about what resonates with your audience. And if you notice the diversity in these pictures, there's gender diversity, there is cultural diversity. So we need to think about that too, because a lot of times we do things we're not even consciously aware of, but you want to be representative and think about, am I thinking globally as opposed to just locally? So beyond sports, which is very common, we could use theater, we could use dance, we could use nature. Nature is great because it crosses all cultures. Even though there may be different trees in different places, you can say, let's plant the seed for an idea. Let's see what bears fruit. Let's go out on a limb. Let's branch out in new directions. Because if we do, we'll get to the root of the problem, and coming up with ideas, the sky's the limit. So right there, look at all the visual metaphors that could be used just from the image of this tree, right? In HR, we often talk about people having a career path, right? And when you come to a fork in the road on your career path, we use that phrase literally or metaphorically. To me, a career is not necessarily a path, but mine was a roller coaster. Because my career roller coaster had ups and downs, twists and turns, exhilarating highs, terrifying plummets, right? So if you think of your career as a path versus a roller coaster, then metaphor will explain how you visualize your career and how you explain what you've experienced over the course of your career trajectory. And one of the classics is life is like a what? Let's see who can type this into the chat box fastest. Box of chocolates. And in what ways is life like a box of chocolates? For those who've never seen Forrest Gump, because what? You never know what you're going to get. Exactly right. Except if you get the Whitman sampler, which is the box of chocolates, the only one I know that comes with the map. that tells you what each of the chocolates is. So my brother doesn't take a bite out of each one or squeeze it to find out which one's the caramel or which one has nuts inside, right? So think about that. Think about who came up the innovation and creativity of coming up with the idea of putting a map on a box of chocolates to explain to each person visually what each one is. So just, we don't even think about those things, we just take them for granted. So we talked about the tip of the iceberg, what we see versus what we don't, and it's up to us to dive beneath the surface to come up with metaphors that will resonate with people. And lastly, visual storytelling. We could spend a whole day just talking about that. Just very briefly, what do we mean by visual storytelling? It's painting a picture with words, almost as if creating a mental movie in someone's mind's eye. And think about the word movie. A movie, the word movie is short for moving pictures. And why is it called moving pictures? Because it's composed of individual frames. If you've ever seen a film, they're individual frames at 60 frames is projected at 60 frames a second. IMAX is even faster than that. It tricks our brain into seeing movement, but they are literally, each frame is a still picture. That's why we call them movies. That's why they are moving pictures. And again, that's a metaphor that we often don't even think about. So here, let me give you the history of visual communication in 3 slides. It started with cave drawings, 44,000 BC. This is one from France and Spain. I forget the name of the place in France where this is from 44,000 BC. In 3000 BC, pictograms actually evolved into the alphabet in Egypt. And today we use emojis, which came out in 1999, right? So it took us 44,000 years to get from cave drawings to emojis. But this is hot off the presses, 44,000 years ago. This is literally today, hot off the presses from 3 hours ago in the New York Times. They just found
visual leadership.
They just found a cave drawing in Indonesia, which is 1,500 years older than the ones they found in France. They found these pigs from 45,500 years ago. And if you Google it, you'll find this article in the New York Times today, and as well as some YouTube videos that explain it. So again, we are just continuing the legacy of our caveman ancestors when we are drawing things out and communicating visually. So with that, I just want to sum this up by saying the first 2 tend to be visible to the eye, right? To the physical eye. We draw things, we show people visual images, we use mental models and frameworks. The other 2 are visible to the ear. We can use metaphors, analogies, and storytelling that paint a picture with words, but without anyone actually taking the information in through the eye. So we can use visual imagery.
Sorry, Todd, I've just muted everyone just to make sure we don't have any background noise, and that muted you as well. Apologies.
Thank you. So just to sum up, because now we're going to go into the main event, we could use visual imagery, visual language, or any combination. And I think when we use I don't know if you know VARK, visual, auditory, reading and writing, and kinesthetic. Sometimes people talk about learning styles, like are you a visual learner, an auditory learner? Science has shown we are all 4, depending on the situation and our preferences and things like that. So, but when you use the combination, when you use visuals and auditory and reading and writing and kinesthetic, which is about movement or feel, we are hitting all 4 of those components. So think about how you could use all of them, not just 1 or 2 of them, to help get your message across so that other people will see what you're saying. So what I'd like to do right now is this. I'm doing a whole webinar just based on this model coming up in a few months. So one thing about how can we apply everything we just talked about so it's not just hypothetical, theoretical, or academic. I always say that the true value of knowledge is not in its accumulation, but in its application. So how can we apply this in the real world through the use of one of my models, which is my passion skill matrix. So if you would, take out a blank piece of paper and draw this 4-box matrix. Take just 30 seconds to do that. And this model is called the passion skill matrix. So along the left side, go from I don't like it to I like it. And along the bottom, from I'm not good at it to I'm good at it. So I'll let you catch up there. So the left side is passion and the bottom is skill. So I'll give you about 30 seconds just to take this in and write this down. So I have all the visual models in my toolkit, in my coaching toolkit. I teach in my class. I do a whole 3-hour workshop just on this model. So what you're seeing today is just, again, the tip of the iceberg, but let's introduce it. If there's something, if you're good at something or great at something and you like it, one other thing I wanted to mention, for those who like to quantify these, you could score them from 0 to 5 to 10. And there's a way of, this is the advanced version, but I just wanted to mention it, because as you score things, because you may say, I'm good at it, but are you a 9 or are you a 6, right? So you want to think about differentiators within each category. Do you like it or do you love it? Is it a 5.5 or is it a 9.5, right? So the upper right corner, if you're good at something or great at something and you like it or love it, what would you call that box in the upper right? Let's put that in the chat box. Let's take some guesses. What would you call the upper right quadrant? Sweet spot. Armin, you got it. I don't know if you cheated. I don't know if you read my book. I don't know if you took a class. But yes, that is the sweet spot. When what you do and who you are in alignment, that's your sweet spot. That's where you're in the state of flow. When people ask you, what are you the guru of or the go-to person for, that's your sweet spot. Time flies. You do your best work. That's where you shine in your sweet spot. What would you call the upper left? You like it, maybe you even love it, but you're not great at it yet. And the word yet, just like in the growth mindset work of Carol Dweck, yet adds the world of possibility. It's not like you're not good at it. You just haven't reached that level of good or greatness yet. What would you call that? Room to improve, the learning box. Vicky got it, the growth zone. That is your growth zone. So when you spend time in that zone, you have an interest in something, maybe an aptitude for something, a passion for something, but that's where you need to really work on things. That's where you need to develop those skills to turn them into your sweet spot category. What would you call the lower right? You're good at something and maybe even great at it, but you don't like it or you maybe even hate it. What would you call that box? Look into the chat, but your comfort zone. Yep. Duty box. Yep. Comfort zone. Yeah, I call it again, there's no wrong answers, but these are my answers for my model. This is the default zone. This is where you do things almost on autopilot, or people look to you to do this by default. Oh, Todd, you're a good writer. Can you proofread and edit all my memos, right? Oh, you're really good at Excel. Can you turn my Excel spreadsheet into a pie chart, right? This is where people come to you because you're known for something, you're good at something. Maybe you used to like it, but maybe you're tired of it, you're burnt out. Maybe you're just not interested in doing that anymore. I used to be a project manager. I don't love project management anymore, but because that's just not what I like to do right now. But sometimes people may look to me for project management services because they know I've done it in the past. Your default zone is what you're known for and known at, but you may not necessarily have a passion for it anymore, or if ever. And what would you call this box? You don't like it, maybe you hate it, you're not good at it, maybe you suck at it. What is this box? It's your living hell, as Francisco said, thorn in my side, grudgment zone, avoidance. Yes, I call it the failure zone. This is the zone where if you're doing something here, if you've tried and you can't get better, if you've tried to like it and you just can't, that's your failure zone because you're setting yourself up for failure. And I talk about this in my class. I took a job years ago as vice president of business development for a web design company. I love the CEO. I love the company and the culture. It was my first VP title. The salary was great. And I just set myself up for failure from day one because it was completely the wrong fit for me. At the time I was out of work, I needed a job, it came along, but I immediately thrust myself into the failure zone. I tried to learn to like it. I tried to learn to get better at it. And I just hit a wall. And I just realized after 90 days, let's just go our stuff. We're still friends, but it didn't work out. So think about that. For your failure zone, do you not like something because you're not good at it, or are you not good at it because you don't like it? And I'm going to be really honest and vulnerable and candid here. Failure zone for me, public speaking was in my failure zone. That was like a 0 and 0. I was terrified of it. I was terrible at it. And I gave myself a 0 or a 1 in public speaking. Over the years, I got a little better at it. I grew my confidence. I started putting myself out there more. I actually started to like it a little bit. It inched its way up into this growth zone, and now it's my sweet spot. So I've done TEDx talks, I teach, I speak. So it just goes to show that you could get out of the failure zone and into the growth zone and across to the sweet spot if you work at something, if you put your heart and soul into it. The flip side of that is your sweet spot can drop down into your default zone and turn into the failure zone if you let your skills atrophy, if you turn into a dinosaur, if you don't keep up with the times. I always say that in an ever-changing world, if you're standing still, you're falling behind. So if we don't keep our skills and our knowledge up, we are going to turn our sweet spots into default zones and maybe even failure zones. So this is a constantly evolving cycle. So with that, what I'd like you to do right now is think about how can you spend more time in your sweet spot, but not all your time. Why? If you spend 100% of your time in your sweet spot, then what? You're not growing, as Gemma just said, right? So you want to be spending, I would say, about 70 to 80% of your time above that line in your sweet spot and growth zone. If you're in the default zone, maybe that's something you could delegate, maybe something you could learn to like again and recharge and refresh. But you want to think about what percentage of your time you're spending in your box. And I always get people saying to me, my coaching clients will say, no wonder I'm so miserable in my job. No wonder I'm so disengaged. No wonder I'm so depressed. I'm spending all my time below the line. Right? Now, in every job, there's always things in your default zone. Like I don't like negotiating contracts and doing paperwork and doing my taxes and stuff, but I run my own business. I have to do that and or outsource it. But I try to spend as little time as possible in that box. So now I'd like you to take a clean sheet, or if you have room in these 4 boxes, and I want you to create your own passion skill matrix. And then we're going to put you in breakout rooms to share them with other people. Let me walk you through as a sample mine. I just created this last night because I always created text-based ones, but this is my visual version. And that's the trick. I want you to create a visual passion skill matrix. So here is mine. In my sweet spot is anything revolving around my book, Visual Leadership. It is public speaking. It's my content. It's doing podcasts and blog posts, training my clients, doing coaching, teaching at NYU and Columbia. That's my sweet spot. My growth zone is I'm trying to create now a video masterclass series based on my book, where I'm going to do a series of both live workshops and like a kind of pay-per-view masterclass series. So that's in my growth zone. I need to figure out and learn how to transition what I do in the real world to the online world in Zoom. My default zone, as I just mentioned, is doing all the business stuff, signing contracts and negotiation. I hate it. I don't like it. I'm not great at it, but I have to do it, except for what I can outsource. And my failure zone is technology. I am great if it works. If it stops working, I'm like a deer in the headlights. I just stare at my screen saying, all right, now what do I do? Right? So I need to either outsource that stuff. I need to have my go-to people. I need to know people where technology is their sweet spot, right? So they can help me fix my failure zone problem. So that's my visual passion skill matrix. What I want to do right now, I am going to put, it's 2:04, so we want time for the breakout rooms. I'm going to put 4 minutes on the clock. So spend 1 minute in each box and create your own visual passion skill matrix starting now. Go. 4 minutes without my talking. All right, 2 more minutes. Okay, take about another 30 seconds. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. All you're trying to do is visually represent your 4 ideas in the best you can. You can always fine tune it and color it in later, but just you want to get it out of your mind's eye onto paper so that your people in your breakout room can see what you're saying. So in just a couple of seconds, Paddy and Grant are going to put you in breakout rooms of around, what, 3 or 4 people in each one for about 5 minutes. And you just want to pair and share and just walk people, just as I did, walk people through your passion skill matrix and whatever you want to talk about. So I know it's not a lot of time. If this was a 3-hour workshop, we'd give you a whole probably 20 minutes to do that. But today is just quick tastes and a little sample of what the possibilities are of using visual thinking in a leadership context. With that, first of all, let's everyone hold it up. Let's just see what you came up with before we put you into breakouts. So it's always fun to see. Great, some beautiful work. Love it. Really nice. All right, I came to the right place today. So all right, let's get visually jamming in our breakout rooms. So time is up. So 5 minutes in groups of around 3 or 4. Share your drawings, and we'll bring you back, and then we'll talk about it. We have about 20 minutes left from now, so we'll stay afterwards for more Q&A. But let's go into our breakout rooms and have some fun.
Hey,
Come back.
Everyone's back. Make sure Todd's back. That'd be funny if he leaves us. Then me and
I
you-
am back. I am back.
Oh, he's back. Hey.
So
let's so we have about 15 minutes left, and we're going to save the Q&A for after we reach the 30-minute, you know, the half hour point. But we just want to get some thoughts. Anyone who wants to turn their mics on. I was with John Webster and Vicky. They like the idea of and Francis. They like the idea of flipping the eye on yourself by having to reflect on your own passion skill matrix. So many of us as coaches do this with clients, but we very often don't do this on ourselves or with ourselves. So it's good to make the time and take the time to actually do this. But I want to hear from people. Feel free to, you know, however you want to do it, raise your hand or whatever, and just jump in for like, let's do a couple of minutes of just thoughts on this exercise.
Just to say, while somebody's getting brave enough to speak, Paddy's put a link in the chat, so we've created a space on the Miro board for you to upload some of those visuals. It'd be good to see some of those, so we can maybe have a look at some of them as well. I mean, from my perspective, Todd, I mean, I stayed in the main room with Paddy, but I found it really hard to say what's that top right sweet spot. Maybe it's a combination of kind of modesty of, oh, am I really that good at that? And I don't know, but it's also whether you're kind of talking about where you are right now, or are you looking where you want to be in 6 months to a year, maybe, and that kind of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that. But yeah, it's almost like it's a snapshot in time. So it's interesting to do a passion skill matrix and then revisit it 6 months or a year later and see what was on there. Did you move any of your growth zones into sweet spots? Did you get out of that failure zone, or why? Maybe that's why you're so miserable. If you're not sure what to put in your sweet spot, you can ask someone else. What would you say is in my sweet spot?
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes we don't feel comfortable doing that. So there's a lot of different ways. Again, we could spend 3 hours just on this one model, but it's great just to get a taste of this. So who else? Thank you, Grant, for kicking us off. Someone else with an insight from this exercise.
I'll have a go. So just touching on sweet spot again. What I realized when I drew mine out was that a lot of the things in the sweet spot were things I liked, things I'm good at, but I don't get to do as often. And so for me, it's almost, I probably need to spend a bit more time on these things because that's my sweet spot, but I'm not focused on those. I'm focused on things I either have to do or end up doing, et cetera, et cetera. So that was quite interesting.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Yeah, if we're spending all our time doing things we have to do as opposed to things that we want to do. In fact, I got really frustrated. I said yes to a project that I didn't realize what the scope and magnitude was going to be, and I'm like just dreading it. It will be over by April, but I'm like kicking myself. In November, I wrote a blog post called "Make This Month a November." It was about saying no to things instead of saying yes to everything. But that was before I said yes to this, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into. So sometimes it happens, but that's the key. Is like we need to get above that line and try to spend as much time as possible. We can't always, but it's a great thing to think about. Someone else. Let's get a couple more.
Todd, Jason here. When I looked at the kind of failure zone, I came up with. I was trying to come up with what is it I hated about the failure zone, and actually drawing it out made me think about office work. Actually, it was drawing out the routine, drawing out the fact that the metaphor of wearing a tie to the office and having I've drew a clock in to say I'm looking at the clock and going at 5 o'clock at night, and I think what drawing it out helped me to think about was almost what specifically I didn't like about being in that failure zone and why, for me, that whole aspect of it sucked. It wasn't necessarily doing the work, but the constraints around doing the work.
Yeah, Jason makes an excellent point. A lot of times when I do this, in fact, I'm going to be doing a 90-minute version of just the Passion Skill Matrix as a webinar probably in February. So if you sign up, we'll give you the information to sign up for my mailing list later, but you'll find out about if you want to attend it. But Jason makes a great point. So just list the words is not the same thing as forcing yourself to draw the picture of it. Because to force the picture, that answers the question why. What specifically about, you can say, oh, I hate this or I don't like this, but in order to draw it, you need to understand it better. People say, oh, I know what I'm talking about, I just can't explain it. Well, if you can't explain it, then you don't have that clarity that maybe you need. So Jason, I love that point that Jason makes. The act of drawing forces you to think about things visually, activating another part of your brain so you can capture it and then communicate it with someone else and tell them the story behind the drawing. So thank you for that, Jason. Someone else, let's get a couple more.
I had a thought on the passion skill matrix. So when drawing it, I always like to combine things. So when we talked about why not leaving the sweet spot or the comfort zone, so how can we leave it, or how can we exceed and go into the growth zone? So maybe it's all on the same line. These are both areas we like to do. So the one is what we're good at, and the other one is what we're not good at yet. So why not combining it maybe? So the drawing can help me to see, okay, I have this thing in the sweet spot, and maybe I can use this to support my growth spot and to evaluate my growth spot and improve on that area.
Great, thank you, Maria. And one of the things about this exercise, I don't know if you realize it, but we're using all 4 ways. We're using visual imagery and drawing, right? This is a mental model flash framework. You had to think of, a lot of people use metaphors in their pictures, and now you're using storytelling to explain it. So in this one exercise, we're doing all 4 of those aspects. So think about how you can incorporate that skill set or that approach or methodology into what you do to help others to see what you're saying, but also to help you see what help you yourself see what you're saying, right? It's not only communicating with other people, it's formulating our own ideas and thoughts and gaining clarity around that. We're going to talk about the exploration. It's, the act of drawing, the act of filling this out is an act of exploration and discovery in a way that a conversation may not do that. And my friend Yaron Previs is here with us today. He is a visual coach, and that's one of his specialties, is using different types of visuals to help in this coaching process. And it's not just images, you can actually use items, symbols. So for example, when I ask people, what are you curious about? Ask why. You know, how flexible are you, right? How can you expand your mind to create more space that you can try new things, right? So it doesn't always have to be drawing. It could be pictures from a magazine. It could be images from Google search. It could be physical objects. The whole idea is to think visually and communicate visually so that it resonates with other people. So let's start to wrap things up, and then we'll stay over time for any questions. So last couple of things I want to talk about. So firstly is how might you use this model to improve the effectiveness both of yourself and others. I've used this in team building workshops where I had everyone do a passion skill matrix. And next time I'm going to do it visually, not just in text. We put them all up on the wall. And then what we did is we created a team passion skill matrix. And this is an actual one from one of my client workshops where we came up with our team matrix. Each person got a different color marker. So again, that made it colorful and visual and fun. This piece of paper was actually a wall size. It took up the whole wall. And basically, it facilitated this conversation where people would say, oh, why is that in your default zone? I thought you loved doing that. And the person would say, no, I hate it. Or why is that in your failure zone? I think you're so good at it. And the other person says, you do? I'm not really, I don't think I'm that good at it. So it created this conversation. And what they ended up doing is redefining the whole department's roles and responsibilities just based on the conversation that was initiated by this exercise. So one of the things I want to say about tools and models, they do not solve the problem for you, but what they do is they serve as a catalyst to the conversation to help you see things that you might not have otherwise seen. So that's the power of models and the power of visuals. So again, we want to set people up for success by, as managers and as leaders, allowing people to spend as much time as possible above the line in the sweet spot and growth zone to get out of those failure and default zones. Because as Frederick Taylor said, he was one of the first management consultants way back in 1911, said that people do best what they like best to do. And so you want to spend time in your sweet spot. I don't know if people are familiar with this. I was not. I created this model here about 20 years ago. And then someone recently said, it kind of reminds me of the Ikigai. So I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the side here you have good at, passion, what you love, but the other elements add a whole other dimension that I hadn't thought about before. And this is Ikigai in Japanese, means it's your reason for being. So this was really an interesting insight where someone saw my model, my passion skill matrix, and said it's kind of like this other one. And now it just, again, expanded my mind to look at my model in a whole broader context. So again, there's always more out there. Again, anything here was the tip of the iceberg. It's up to you to dive beneath the surface and see what else is out there. And related to this, Aristotle said, where your talents and the needs of the world intersect, there lies your vocation. And if you think about the word vocation, it has the same root as vocal, which is about speaking or calling. Your vocation is your calling. Your vocation is not vacation. Vacation is what you get to do after you do some work and make some money to go on vacation. Your vocation is your calling. What are you meant to do? Your P&P, passion and purpose. What do you have a passion for, and what fulfills your sense of purpose, where you're doing work that has meaning and can impact and change the world? That's the foundation of what visual leadership is all about. So you now have this new tool in your toolkit, the Passion Skill Matrix, and this is chapter 17 in my book, and my gift to you today for everyone attending, if you go to toddcherches.com/passion, you could download the PDF for free of this one chapter from my book to get a little taste of what the book's about, but also a little more insight into the model itself. So you can feel free to do that and sign up for my email list at the time as well. So Q&A we're going to hold for after we just wrap up. So last couple of things. I have this question for you. What was your biggest takeaway from today? What is the one thing, again, look at the ant carrying that gigantic leaf. What is one thing you're going to carry away from today and you will think about differently or do differently going forward? So if you would, type that into the chat box. So when we save the chat, we will have a list of those things, because I always love hearing what people have to say. So let's just take 30 seconds, write down in the chat box, what was the big takeaway for you from today? I'm going to not talk. I'm going to set the timer for 30 seconds to allow you all to type in your biggest takeaway. All right, great. So it's 27 after the hour. I'm going to start to wrap up now, and then we'll stay after for Q&A. So you typed your answer in the chat box. Thank you for sharing that. Well, I always love reading the chat box, because when you're, as you know, when you're presenting, it's impossible to keep up with the chat box. So I always print it out and read it afterwards just to see what people had to say. So last couple of things. There's a million books out there, and one of the things I'm known for is being a business book addict. Back in 1998, I started reading many business books. I've averaged one business book a week, around 50 a year, 50 business books a year over the last 22 years since 1998. So I've read over 1,100 business books, and I finally wrote my first one last year. So people always say, of all your business books, to be a better visual leader, what are some of your favorites? And these are some of my favorites. Gar Reynolds changed my life with.
Sorry, Todd, you're not sharing your screen. Are you displaying something?
Oh, did that disappear?
Yeah, you just have to reshare, I think.
Oh, sorry. I think, you know what happened when I got put in the breakout room? I think I lost my screen share.
Ah, yeah.
Hold on one second. Oop. Okay, great. So I hadn't been sharing my screen the last couple of minutes, so you missed my big ant and everything?
Yep.
Oh, all right. So I did not even notice. So the breakout room totally screwed me up. So so you probably missed this too. This is toddcherches.com/passion for the free download of my book chapter. Here's the big ant. What are you carrying away from today? And this is my highlights of my bookshelf. In addition to what's behind me, I have all these other books stacked up in another room. So these are some of my top book recommendations on visual thinking. These are the ones that most influenced my thinking. Gar Reynolds' presentation Zen changed my life, as did Nancy Duarte's Slideology. So when we send out the slides, you will have this visual book list. And if you go to my website and go to toddcherches.com/subscribe, you can download my list of my top 52 visual leadership books. So with that, as I mentioned, this is how you subscribe to get the list, and then Passion will get you the free chapter. Here's that link as well. And while you're on my website, check out my TEDx talk on the power of visual thinking that I did 2 years ago, and it will tell you basically my origin story of how I got into visual thinking in the first place. So with that, coming to you live from New York, I just want to leave you with this quote by the French novelist Marcel Proust, who said, "The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new lands, but in seeing with new eyes." So I hope that you leave here today seeing the world of visual thinking with new eyes, beyond graphic recording, beyond picking up a pen, thinking in terms of visual imagery, models, metaphors, and storytelling, so that you can help people to see what you're saying. And with that, I thank you. I'm going to stop my share, and we'll open it up to questions. So thank you to everyone for being here today. Feel free to link in with me, and I'm happy to stay connected with all of you. So thank you.
Thanks, Todd. That was awesome. Should we give Todd a round of applause? Come off mute, everybody. I thought that was fantastic. Amazing stuff. I can't believe how much information you crammed in there. It's a good job you talk fast.
And I slowed down today. Usually I talk twice as fast.
Excellent stuff.
So what questions? Who has comments? Who has thoughts? How you can apply this? Anything you want to say? I'm here. Open it up. Just I'm done talking. So it's all you now.
So Todd, you talked about right at the beginning about being really quite shy and nervous about speaking in public, which you could not tell at all, by the way, now. So you've obviously got over that. So where would you put that now in your passion skill matrix? Was it originally like in a failure zone, or was it a growth zone for you?
It was way down in the failure zone. I could talk about my introversion for hours, but in my NYU class, I have my students all talk within the first 10 minutes. And then I say to them, and it's totally truthful, they talk more in that first 10 minutes than I spoke in all my years of junior high school, college, and graduate school, because I never once got up in front of a room and spoke. I was so terrified of it. I was sitting on the back of the room, behind the scenes bookworm. The fact that I'm up and doing what I do is just, it's so amazing to me. It's almost imposter syndrome, saying, is that me actually? So yeah, to answer your question, Vicky, I've come a long way. It was in the failure zone. I took a Dale Carnegie public speaking class that forced me, and I almost quit at the break because I was so terrified when they said everyone's got to get up and speak. And I was like, I can't do this. There's no way I could do this. So I actually stood at the door when everyone came back from the break, and I almost left. And I always think about that. You know, you think about forks in the road and the road not taken. If I had left that day and not gone back in, I think I'd have a completely different career and life, because that literally set me off on my path to being a trainer, a professor, a public speaker. So that's what I'd say. When you push yourself out of your comfort zone, you realize maybe it's not as scary as you thought. You realize you're better at it than you think you are. And then it's just practice. It's that flywheel effect that Jim Collins talks about in Good to Great. The hardest thing is to go from 0 to 1. Then 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and then up to 100 is much easier. But that biggest gap is with anything is between 0 and 1. So that's what I say, push yourself to get to that 1, and then boom, you're off and running.
Todd, this is Satak. Todd,
yeah.
How did you overcome the I can't draw syndrome? I mean, what did you do? What were the steps you took to go from 0 to 1 to 2 and so forth?
Yeah, like anything else, it's a skill. I'm a fan of Dan Rome's book, Back of the Napkin, and he actually has this, Back of the Napkin is the book, Unfolding the Napkin is the workbook. And I actually did this almost as a self-study course. I did every exercise, and the more I drew, the better I got, and the more confident I got. So now I can get up in front of a whiteboard or a flip chart. In fact, here's a real life example. So let me just, can you, I'll draw it. So I don't know if you know Theory X and Theory Y management, right? Theory X management is the assumption that people do their jobs just for a paycheck, they hate their jobs, and they're going to do the bare minimum. Theory Y management is that people want to do the best job possible. How do I remember the difference between Theory X and Theory Y? A Theory X manager, let me make sure you can see this. A Theory X manager has their arms crossed like an X, and they have a scowl on their face. So the visual memory technique is, this is Theory X, because their arms are in an X. A Theory Y manager has their hands up as in a Y, and they ask, when you say, I'd like to do this, they say, sure, why not, right? So Theory X is like standing over you like an overseer. Theory Y is, hey, welcome everyone. You get a chance to do what you want, and let's talk about your passion skill matrix, right? So right here, this is a classic management model from the 1950s, but I can never remember which was Theory X and Theory Y until I drew this out, right? So this didn't take much skill to do, right? And I did it in just a few seconds, but that's a perfect example of how, if you could draw a stick figure, you can visually represent your idea, and then you just get better, like as with any skill. So that's something I wasn't even planning on doing, but I just figured I would throw it in at no additional charge. So there you go.
That's great. Thank you.
Someone else?
Jason here again. Just thinking about your work with leaders, okay? Obviously, I imagine that when they come into the room, and this is all new to them, they are actually kind of the 0 level. Yeah. To how do you get people from that 0 to the point where they feel they can walk out of the room and then start using that, those tools with their colleagues, etc.?
That's a great question. Well, of the 4 components, if you had to guess which of the 4 leaders feel most comfortable with, which do you think, between using visual imagery and drawing, mental models, metaphor, and storytelling, which do you think most leaders would gravitate towards most easily? In the chat box, or just saying it, which do you think?
I think they would. Well, I suppose they would gravitate towards storytelling, or more towards the data stuff.
Yeah. So leaders are always talking, right? The thought of picking up a pen and going up to a flip chart, as I just did, is outside of most people's, not only outside their comfort zone, but it's not even on their radar, right? And I just used that's a metaphor, right? To have something on your radar is a metaphor. So I take people through an exercise where I have a few different exercises I do. Like, for example, I was once doing a workshop on visual storytelling for a group of 20 CEOs. And the CEOs, one of them said, I hate storytelling. I'm terrible at storytelling. And I said, well, why do you say that? And he went on to tell this great story about how why he hates storytelling, right? And we all looked at each other like, that was an amazing story, right? So we put just like I can draw, I can't tell stories is another limitation we put on ourselves. Children tell stories, grandparents tell stories. If you say to someone, how was your day today? Oh, you wouldn't believe what happened to me today. That's a story, right? I think when we elevate and magnify something like storytelling, people say, oh, I'm not that good at it. Just like with drawing, anyone could, draw a line or a square or a circle or a triangle. I do an exercise that I call silent introductions. I have people pair up with a big piece of paper and markers. And I say, you need to introduce yourself to the person sitting next to you. You have 5 minutes. Oh, by the way, you can't speak. And they're like, well, what are we supposed to do? I said, draw. So they pair up. So if I drew a house with a question mark, you might draw a map with an arrow, right? To say, where do you live? And here's where I live, right? So once you start to do it, it becomes Pictionary and it becomes fun. So I think it's baby steps. I think that's a great question as Jason's asking. What are those baby steps to show people that, hey, you can do it? And when you read my article in Ink, Can You Draw What Your Company Does? I talk about how by drawing the metaphors that they use to explain their business, they realized that they were not on the same page. Long story short, one person described their company as, we are the whale and our competitors are little goldfish. And they said, no, that's not a good metaphor. We are a dolphin and our competitors are sharks. So we had a whole conversation about what kind of fish we were, right? But what's the difference? A whale was big. We're not bigger than everyone else up the competition. They are sharks because they are cutthroat, and we are dolphins because we are warm, cuddly, and friendly, and smart, and good communicators, right? So in order to think about which fish most represents us, we had this whole conversation and say, from now on, we are dolphins. How can we be more dolphin-like, more service-oriented, more empathetic, more cuddly and friendly than our competitors? So just that exercise, and I talk about that in that Ink article, changed everything. It got them all on the same page. So I think when people see it and realize that it's not that scary and experience it for themselves, that's how they say, wow, this was not only interesting and fun, but it's productive. It's a new way of thinking and communicating.
I love that exercise, Todd, the introducing yourself visually without speaking.
Yeah, thank you.
I've got a question, Todd.
Yeah.
Who would you rather be, Batman or Superman? Because obviously nobody wants this Batman.
Well, I'm wearing my Superman shirt today, and Grant is Batman. In my TED Talk, and the reason Grant is asking, in my TED Talk, I opened with saying when I was a kid, when people say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would say Superman. And they say, well, there's already a Superman. What's your backup plan? I'd say, all right, Batman. So it's like, that was my dream as a 5 or 6 year old. But then as a coach now, someone once said to me, you are in some ways like both Superman and Batman. You save people. Through a Superman, you don't have X-ray vision, but you have the power of visual thinking. That's your superpower. And Batman, he has the utility belt with like the bat boomerang and everything. You have all of these different visual thinking tools, tips, and techniques in your toolkit. So I'm happy to be able to say that I have aspects of Superman and Batman. In fact, in some days I put on my Captain America or Spider-Man. So I'm different characters depending on what mood I'm in that day. But thank you for asking that, Grant. It's we all want to think about what's your superpower that you use when you put on your cape and fly out there into the world to meet your clients or to get on stage. What are the powers that you bring to the table? So thank you for asking that. Someone else?
I have a question, Todd.
Hi, Berna. Nice
to see you. Nice to meet you, and everyone too. So I have a question about millennials. Since you are a university professor, you might be more interaction with millennials. And I'm a coach, and I have been coaching certain ages, but I also have had some interaction with millennials. And I want to understand about your vision. How do you see that visual leadership will evolve into with the vision of or the perspective of the millennials? Because the leaders will be leading the millennials, and they are preparing us. The managers are preparing themselves to become the leaders of the millennials. What's your vision?
Yeah, I mean, millennials are digital natives. They grew up playing video games and on screens all the time. So they're more receptive. It's the baby boomers that are sometimes resistant because this is a new way of thinking, a new way of doing. But millennials latch right onto this because it's fun, it's engaging. And my educate, engage, and excite, my 3 E's, it's educational because they're learning a new skill. It's engaging because they're actually engaged in something, and it's exciting because it's like, oh, now I could use this going out into the real world. So it really crosses all generational lines. It's just about, well, I did a workshop at a visual leadership workshop at a leadership conference up in Lake George, New York, a couple of years ago, where it was at a really beautiful, it's up in the mountains on a beautiful lake. Everyone got a big card and colored markers, and they had to go out into nature and draw a picture of something from nature that represented leadership to them. So someone drew a boat or a tree or whatever. And when everyone brought them back, we put them all up on the wall. I took iPhone pictures of all of them. And then my brother took all the pictures and created a music video montage set to music of everyone's pictures. So on day 2, we revealed. So so first, even the people who couldn't draw were inspired by nature, right? And found metaphors of leadership in nature. And then we took it through, went from analog to digital, and then created a music video. And that's a remnant that people will always have looking back on that event. So it's like, be creative, try new things, and push yourself outside of your limits. I do an exercise where I have a whole bag of toys and things like that, and people have to pair things up and say, what do they have in common? Like, what is Gumby and Curious George? They're about the same height, yet but they're different colors. And so it's like, can you find commonalities and differences? So my wife gave me this seashell. It's supposed to be a snail shell to remind me to slow down and talk slower. It doesn't work, so but I keep it with me anyway. But use physical objects, not just drawing, not just pictures, but anything in your environment can be looked at visually as a way to communicate a message. So be creative and have fun, because everyone has Zoom fatigue. Everyone is just tired of the same old thing. No one has time or attention span to read text anymore. The power of visuals, I think we're just in the infancy, and I think everyone on this visual jam knows that, and now it's just about how do we take it to the next level and get other people on board, right? How do we get the non-visual thinkers on board with what we do? Dave Sibbett is the only one I really know, other than until I started doing this. If you know Dave Sibbett's work, he has visual teams, visual leaders, etc. He's still oriented towards drawing, and some people are like, well, I can't draw, that's too sophisticated for me, and they feel alienated. I try to, my target audience is the people who are not necessarily going to be graphic recorders or mind mappers or storyboarders, but I teach them how to think more visually regardless, right? So that's my approach to visual leadership, is for the people who may not be able to draw that well right now anyway. And again, it's a skill that anyone can develop.
Do you have the same kind of approach probably also to help leaders finding the purpose, what they are leading towards?
Yeah. I mean, one of the exercises I do is help people creating a vision board, right? Picture your life, go onto Google. What is your, in an ideal world, if you 5 years from now, what does your life look like? Find a picture of your ideal neighborhood, your house, family, pets. What does that look like? And then how can you make that vision a reality, right? It's one thing when it exists in your mind's eye. It's another thing when you get it out of your head and onto something that you could look at and or show other people. When you put your vision out there into the universe, it increases its likelihood of it happening, right? There's a saying that if you could see the invisible, you could do the impossible. So you want to make the invisible visible, so not only you could see it, but other people can see it and help you turn that vision into reality. So that's what I would say, Tom.
Thank you very much. Just to share the notion, because it struck me lately, was I've been told, Tom, if you can do it alone, then you don't dream big enough.
Yeah.
If you can do it alone, you don't dream big enough.
Yeah. Someone introduced
me. That was really, just that clicked. Yeah.
You just reminded me. There's an African saying that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Right. So, and one of the mantras I use in my team building is to get TEAM, together, everyone achieves more. Just like Tom is saying, a team can achieve so much more than any one individual can do on his or her own. So, so thank you for reminding us of the power of the collective and community to help us achieve our visions.
I had one question. This is John
Hi, John.
Webster. How is it that you see the Martin Luther King speech as visual, but without visuals? Like, can you maybe elaborate on that?
Yeah, he doesn't have he's not showing us a PowerPoint presentation. And if you read the language, he uses poetic language, alliteration, rhyme and rhythm. He uses visual imagery. He paints a picture with words. If you just read the text, that's one way of taking it in. If you just listen to the audio, that's another way. And if you listen to the audio while watching the video, you'll see his body language, his facial expressions, how people react to it. So that's why if I was going to assign you something, if this was a class, I would say on Monday, which is Martin Luther King Day, take 10 minutes out of your day and just watch that speech and watch and listen to it with a visual lens, and you'll see the power of why that is considered one of the great. My blog post is called Martin Luther King, the King of Visual Communication, and it's all.
Right. Well, thank you. I will do that. That's a great thing. Thank you.
Sure, enjoy it. Let me know what you think. Link it with me, and I'm going to post that on my blog on LinkedIn on Monday as a reminder for people. So if you're connected with me on LinkedIn, you'll see my post about that, and you get to read my blog post, and there's the link to the video in the blog post.
Well, Todd, I would like to know how you're going to do the eco check of your visuals. Just imagine that you have like global teams, intercultural, some know, some don't know, different levels of knowledge in a certain whatever thing. It could be projects I'm in or whatever. How do you do the eco check? How do you prepare that the visuals really get to all the people in a team if you are the leader? Because you really need to get them all in.
Yeah, that's a great question that answers. When I was just booked to do a presentation skills workshop in April, and my questions, I always ask the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Those are my questions. So who's in this training? What is it for? What is it about? When and where is it? Why are you doing it? And then that will determine the how and the approach, right? So one of the models that I use, it's in my book, this is my three-legged stool presentation model. So it always starts with the stool. The seat of the stool represents the purpose. The people sitting on the stool is the audience, right? And then the three legs of the stool are the content, the design, and the delivery. So I walk through with my client each step of this model and make sure I have a visual image of who's going to be in there and what's this for, what's this about. So that increases the likelihood of hitting your target. So that's the key. The key is preparation. Some people deliver a one-size-fits-all canned speech and they miss the target because they don't know their audience. Like if I talk to all of you as if you had never heard of visual thinking before, you would be like, who is this guy? We know all this stuff. So I came in today saying, these are people who know visual thinking, you do visual thinking and visual communication. What can I bring to you that maybe you haven't thought about in this way before? So that was my mindset. For a different audience, I would have designed a completely different presentation and workshop. So you really do, it always starts with who's our audience and what's our purpose.
Thank you.
Sure.
One technique that I was once given was to not speak to everybody in the room, but to have 1, 2, 3 individuals that I know more about, and that I know where they come from and which aspirations they have, and make sure that in the speech I connect to them.
Yep.
And basically that way lead by example so that everybody in the room can connect with them too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that way I can pull everyone in.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Probably there would be an approach that is not the fits all approach, but you pick individuals and then pull everyone in from there.
Yeah, I try to find out as much as possible who's in the room. Like so Grant and Paddy and I met twice to discuss this. I watched the previous visual jams with Martin and Charles Louis, just to see what people were responding to. So that's why I'd say P&P is preparation and practice. Do your homework. Don't walk in cold. I did 3 run-throughs of this. And then I fine-tuned it. Even today with that thing about the new the cave drawing of that pig, that was in the New York Times today. I literally just popped that in 15 minutes before I came online today. So always make sure your content is fresh and new. Run through it just to make sure. So that's what I would say is don't let the first time you do something be when you're on stage. Make sure I always over practice and over prepare and make sure that
I just meant it more like in the terms of really visuals. So just imagine if you want to put in success. Yeah, so have a metaphor, something for success. I believe that a person that is poor versus a person that is rich versus a person that is a leader and earns more than 100,000 euros or $1 per year will think different in success than the student or than the junior in a team. So I really meant it like, how can I do the eco check on my visuals, even if I did a good preparation? So I usually do prepare quite well. But it happens every once in a while that there's somebody in an international team that doesn't get the idea. And I don't know how to do the eco check. How can I think from the other people's perspective on the visuals, not on the notes, not on the message I want to get across, but on choosing the right metaphor, on the right visual.
Yeah. I'm gonna use a trainer technique called spotlight, floodlight, spotlight. So the spotlight is on a net. I'm going to floodlight it out to the group and say, how would you respond to a net? And then I'm going to spotlight it back to a net afterwards. So who can respond to Annette's question? How do you do a check to try to reach as many of your audience members as possible so as not to alienate people or lose people? What tips do you have for Annette?
So Annette, if I may ask, I would really be curious what would be an example for what you noticed that did not work.
So, for example, a lot of topics around culture. So if people think about agile project management, agile teams, agile teamwork, and so on, there's lots of ideas about that. And one word I would say everybody has a different idea about is the word respect or trust. So there's this typical keywords that values that have to be discussed to get a common basis, to get the common communication in a team. And I want to get that right. I really want to get that right in the beginning. And so that is why I want to get the team set up on the same base. And yeah, I noticed that this is quite difficult.
So just to give another example, when I have to draw a leader quickly, then when I have to draw a vision quickly or a target or a project goal that we're working towards, then in the past I used the summit with a flag on top and the eyes, and I no longer do that because it has the inherent image of it's cold and I'm lonely. And so I turned away from the summit picture to the sun on the horizon with a street leading towards that's large enough that everyone can join me there. So it's just, it's just a different, I don't know how to explain that, but it's just, everybody's on board and everybody can reach that goal together. So it's just, yeah. For respect, I would not have that. Would be worth a thought. Yeah, what would be a visual for that? Yeah.
When you're teaching an abstract concept like trust, that's a great exercise to say, how would you explain trust? What's a metaphor you would use? What's an example? Tell me about a story. What is trust has the same root as truth, right? Tell me a story that tells me about a time where you lost trust in a leader or someone lost trust in you. So I think you'll always have to have all the answers. You can let them come up. You pose the questions, let them come up with the metaphors. Let's see if who could sketch something out. Or so that's what I would say too. Is like don't, especially with abstract, intangible concepts, different people can have different perceptions. Let them come up with one that resonates with them. I think that would be a great exercise.
Point, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions?
I had one question. It's Martha. Hi.
Hi, Martha.
You mentioned that you have another TED Talk coming up. I was wondering how you're feeling about it, and if you can give us a sneak preview. Would it be the continuation of the first one, the evolution, or completely different?
Great. It's under. Thank you for asking. It's under the same thing as the power of visual thinking. Only I'm focusing specifically on models and frameworks, like why models and frameworks. And one of the we always talk about thinking outside the box, but you can't think outside the box until you have something inside the box. And one of the metaphors I use is, let's say you're setting a table for 8 dinner guests, right? And you open up the kitchen drawer for the silverware, and all the silverware is just dumped in there from last time, just scattered all over. How long would it take you to put together 8 table settings? You open up the next drawer, and all the silverware is in compartments: spoons, knives, forks, different sizes. How much quicker will you be able to set the table with that? That's the power of a mental model. That's the power of a framework. Is life and work is messy and complex, but if we could put things into boxes or compartments, we could see solutions much more quickly and clearly than we could otherwise. So that's just one sample. I have a number of quotes that I use, but that's the idea behind models and frameworks to help us see. No, we're not talking about putting people in boxes and labeling people like you're the this or you're the that, but we're talking about simplifying complexity through thinking visually, by using models and frameworks. So that's in a sample, that's basically a sneak preview. So thank you for asking that, Martha.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you. I am too. It's not, I don't know when it will be rescheduled. It's all based on when the pandemic ends. So we'll find out. And David, I love how you have your passion skill matrix up behind you. Thank you for that. That's great.
Thank you.
Other thoughts, questions? Anything we didn't talk about today that was triggered by our conversation?
I don't know. I feel like you've talked about everything.
So I have one question. Thinking about visual thinking, I think it kind of touches a little bit on maybe where Annette was coming from, is that do you see potential in visual thinking and visual communication in terms of balancing out status differences between those people who've maybe gone to a really good school and a really good university and those people who, for example, maybe worked up from the shop floor who never had an education but have lots of ideas?
Yeah, I mean, one thing about visuals, there's no one right way or best way to do it. I was just watching, I was just telling, because this is a visual jam, I don't know if you know the song Jam On It, the hip hop song from the early days. I was watching the video and listening to Jam On It to get myself psyched in a visual jam mood. It's like, graffiti was a way of, if you remember what New York City subways looked like back in the 70s and 80s, I mean, yes, they were, basically, doing stuff they shouldn't have done on subways and malls and things like that. But the artistry is amazing, the visual expression. People want and need to express themselves through the arts, through music, through, in different ways. And visuals is just one way of doing it. So I think, that's what I would say is, give someone a pen or a piece of chalk and turn, or an iPhone camera and just turn them loose in the world and say, capture images, it's all about storytelling. So that's what I would say. It's in some ways it's an equalizer because no one, in today's with social media, you could take a picture or draw something and post it online. It could go viral, on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. It's just, so that's what I would say. It's, it starts with making people aware, giving them opportunity, giving them the skills and the tools. I always say the mindset, the tool set, and the skill set, right? You need to think about it. That's the mindset. You need to have the tools. And then you have to have the skills to use those tools. So if you just give someone the mind to help someone develop the mindset, tool set, and skill set and turn them loose in the world, there's no limit to what they could create. So that's what I would say.
Thanks.
So I actually have to wrap up at the top of the hour because I have another meeting in about a half hour. So I just want to open up to final thoughts, and Paddy and Grant, I'll stay on with you just for a few minutes just to debrief. But any final thoughts, comments, questions? So I hope you'll link in with me, sign up for my newsletter, download the list, the book list, and the chapter from my website, and we'll stay connected. And I'll see you on future jams.
Thanks, Todd.
Thank you so much, Todd. I'm just posting all of the kind of links that we know about on the chat, just for anyone that missed them. Just on that note, I'm gonna lead us out with one of Todd's recommended songs, and also just give you a view of what the next Visual Jam is going to be about. So let me just put on this song. Probably you can hear it. Up the volume a little bit. Is that okay, Brent? Can you hear that? Yeah. Okay. Let's go over a little bit. There you go. Right. So the next Visual Jam is going to be on the 10th of February, and we have a couple of awesome guests. So we have Adrian Reed, who, if any of us are into the BA professional business analysis profession, Adrian's written a ton of books, and he'll be sharing some thoughts on systems. And we'll also be having the amazing Yuri Malishenko, who's a visual thinker and very prominent in visual. So they'll be joining us for a joint session. So two very different perspectives, different approaches, and it'll be a very different style of session. I don't know how they're going to follow you up on this session, Todd, because today's been absolutely amazing. And you know, the last 24 people that are still on are like the hardcore visual jammers who have stayed back. So appreciate all of you guys for hanging back. I don't know why anyone would have wanted to leave, to be honest. I can only say it could be childcare, but it's been absolutely amazing. So I just want to say thank you so much from my side. Grant, anything from you before we wrap up?
No, I was just enjoying the breakdance music there.
Can I just say something? Because I'd really like to thank you for these sessions. And I'm starting a new job on Monday. And I'd like to say thank you because part of my interview technique was I had to do a presentation. And one of the slides for the presentation was Boris Johnson's approach to the coronavirus, analyse and be as creative as possible. And so, although I can't, as you know now, for my drawings, I'm not that artistic, but I took a load of little icons and stuff. And you gave me the confidence to do that, and I have the job. So thank you very much.
Oh, awesome.
And it was ideas that I can trace back to these sessions.
Done.
So thank you.
But I did a whole session just on visual leadership related to the corona and the pandemic. I did a whole thing on flattening the curve as a visual model. I did a whole thing on how it was about not flipping the switch, but turning a dimmer that's got to go up and down. So again, use this stuff in real life. This is not just for fun and games, right? As we know, we could change the world through the power of pictures.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Hilary. I've got a tear in my eye now, so I'm gonna quickly jump before I start crying on.
Thank you, and stay safe, everybody.
Thank you so much, Hilary. Good luck with the job.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Thanks, David. David's got his little one there as well. See you, Dave.
The youngest visual jammer, right?
Yay. There we go.
8 weeks old yesterday.
Wow. Oh.